Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are joining us from. Let us know. We want to know as well. And prepare your questions because today we have Toni Padilla with me and we have a lot of really fascinating, really interesting topics to cover. So, Toni, first of all, how the hell are you? I'm so happy to see you. It's been so long. I have my partner in crime on the weekend.
Hi, Semra. Have been missing you. Missing you, obviously. Missing football. Missing, I think, normality, obviously, because it's crazy times. But well, thanks God, I'm fine. Everyone is it's safe in my family. Still working from home, so no problems, and it's quite positive. Maybe I'm the exception, right? But I'm staying positive.
Listen, positivity is important, I think, for all of us to get through this because this is a really unprecedented, really difficult time for everybody. Nobody really knows how to navigate the situation. So positivity, optimism, super important for all of us. So before we get into any further discussions, now, as many of you may know, Toni is one of my absolutely favorite people on this planet. We always have so much fun together whenever we're together at the TV, on air, off air. But there's a very important question we need to start off with. How on earth are you doing without being able to watch Sabadell every week?
I never hide that my team is Sabadell. Right now we're in third division, what we call in Spain the Segunda B.
You're third on the table in your group.
Yeah, but we used to be first, and in the last weeks we start to drop points. But well, it's a team with a lot of history. We played 14 years in Spanish first division. Our birth season was in 1969. I wasn't born. We end fourth, and we even played in Europe. My dad was in the stadium, was really happy. And obviously, I miss that. I really miss to go to the stadium. I'm working all weekends with you on TV or anywhere. It's complicated for me to go to the stadium. Sometimes I just watch the games live on streaming or listen to the radio, and I miss that. Go to the stadium with my family, with my dad, with my friends. But I'm used to that. I'm doing these days, for example, is look through internet and some websites and YouTube that you can find even the highlights of the games when we were playing in first division in the 80s. And I found some highlights of games where I was in the stadium and I didn't remember nothing because I was a little child. And it's been quite interesting, and I'm sharing that with my dad. Remember that goal? My dad remembers it. I don't remember. But it's a way to stay connected with my family. Because for me, football is about that also. It's about community. It's about your memories with your beloved ones, with your family, with your dad, with my mom. We used to go all together to the stadium. My dad, my sister as well. So, well, I miss a little bit that. It's true.
I think we all miss that, don't we? But I know you also have a really cool collection of football artifacts. Just to your right, I'm guessing it is. Do you think you can share any of those with us? Because Toni's a great storyteller and he's a historian, and I think that's something we need to take advantage of here. So.
Well,
here we go.
We have a lot of things that we collect with my wife traveling all around the world. Especially, we have a lot of things from Africa. We really love Africa. It's Africa is so big. It's different cultures, obviously, but we're really enjoying going that. I think that the people always help you, and it's beautiful. The culture is really interesting, and we have collected a lot of things. It's also some football things. Here in the middle, it's like some kind of. We have that, for example. Like it's like.
Oh, that's brilliant! I love that.
It's like
it looks like Johan Cruyff, kind of.
No, it's supposed to be Francesco Totti.
Oh God, I'm way off the mark there. Okay.
Wearing the wrong colors, but it's like a sub-battle player. It's made it bigger, and it was a gift that I also received because it's one of my favorite players, Francesco Totti.
Oh, awesome!
It's for Francesco here with us.
And so, what about books? Have you been reading any good books lately? I know you've been writing books too in the past, but are you reading any ones that you
try? Yeah, obviously, I try to read because it's a way to clear my mind. And also sometimes, I love to read a lot of books about history. And sometimes if you read about moments where the things were worst, you realize that, okay, it's a complicated time, but it's not. It can be even worse. So I've been reading a lot. I've been reading a lot of books of the Second World War lately.
Wow.
It's like so because obviously it was one of the worst moments in history, and I end the book quite interesting. It's from American writer called Tits Volkmann. It's Central Europe. It's a lot of histories of soldiers, generals, artists, people that were living under Hitler in Germany and under Stalin in the Soviet Union, and how they deal with the Second World War, and how they became at the same time victims and also people to blame, that it wasn't easy for the people to adapt to these times. And I think it's quite interesting to read about history, because you realize that some people, for example, my generation, living in Europe, we have been really lucky. No wars, no civil wars, and no situations like this coronavirus. But in the past, it used to be more common. Each generation had a problem that it was really complicated to deal with that. So sometimes you come back to history and you realize that maybe people was even harder, or they know how to deal with certain situations, or the opposite, that it's quite normal to feel a little bit lost when you stay at home in a situation like that, because we're not ready for that. So we don't have to blame ourselves. We just have to stay positive and try to help each other. And every time it's a big crisis, that something happens, we have to kind of people that just want to take his own benefit, and people that decided to stay in the community and help the others. So when you come back to this, you realize that it's been always like that, and it reminds you that it's important to create your own group of people, that it's positive people that want to help at any time that is possible.
No, you're absolutely right, especially in Spain, that is such a social culture, and we're so used to going outside and spending most of our times outdoors. It is all of a sudden kind of like a shock to the system that we have to be inside 24/7, even though it's the right thing to do, but we're not programmed for that. We're not used to that, and I think it's a lot harder for us to adapt. I mean, I'm not Spanish, but I have become kind of Spanish, I guess, living here for so long. But I'm also a very social person, and I love to be outdoors as much as possible. But some of the perks of being indoors, you take up new hobbies, you get to read a lot of books, you get to watch a lot of Netflix. And then there's one series, and I know you've already watched it, and I just started watching it yesterday, and that's The English Game. And I've only seen the first episode, so I don't really want too many spoilers onto what happens by the end of the season. But I know that you feel that this is not exactly how the real story went, that the producers, the directors, they took some creative licenses in putting this together. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what the real truth behind the Hollywood version of this story is.
I really enjoyed The English Game. I think it's really good, but we have to understand that it's a fiction based in real facts and real history. But it's not. It doesn't pretend to be like a documentary explaining exactly what happened. But the history is that. It's the history of what we can call the first professional football player. So it was an incredible Scottish player from Glasgow that it was the first to earn money to play for another club.
Right?
It's Fergus. Obviously, that he go down from Glasgow to northern England in Lancashire to play for a club called Darwin. But it still exists, but it's in lower divisions. It's a fixed case. So and at the moment, the main history, it's true that happened. The FA and the CAP, because at the time it didn't exist a championship, like it doesn't exist. We can call now a Premier League. That didn't exist. It was just the FA Cup. So it was in the hands of gentlemen, the most part of them based in southern England, in London, that they went to the most incredible college like Eton, from Cambridge, and they've been playing in some clubs that in fact were teams where all the former students of certain places play together. So like the old Etonians, like the old Carthusians. So people wealthy with a lot of money, that they play to have good time, to stay obviously in shape. And suddenly they realized that in working class areas, especially in northern England, workers started to play as well, and football became important for the community. That was different, because these clubs from London at the beginning were like, it's our club, it's our sport, it's our laws. And suddenly it was people that was changing the game, because suddenly a
So
team
they felt
from
threatened and they were trying to protect what they
obviously,
felt was theirs.
and that started the war, and that happened. But the truth was more complicated. So I'm trying to don't tell any spoiler, obviously. In the reality, it were a lot of clubs involved in that process. For example, at a certain moment in the English game, it's also important a football club based in Blackburn. So in that case, they take the license to decide that it's a football club, Blackburn Football Club. That club didn't exist. At the time, there were two football clubs based in Blackburn, the famous Blackburn Rovers and also Blackburn Olympic. So to don't make more complicated the history, they decide to merge in fiction the two clubs to explain that history. But it's really beautiful, and the English game, really interesting. It's a way that make you realize that we don't know the history of the game and how important it was that moment, how important were that persons that really exist and appear in the English game. And it's an excuse to try to learn more history about the times, not just about football, because as we will realize, the English game is not just about football. It's also about, for example, how the families change, the role of the women, for example, and the rights of the workers. So it's football mixed with the history of England in the late 19th century, and I really enjoy it. I think it's a really worth to watch the English game.
Well, as I said, we've only watched one episode so far, and it looks amazing. We really enjoyed it, but because we have so much time on our hands, we're trying not to binge series. So we're just spreading everything out over the course of a few days. So we'll finally get to the end of it by the end of the week, I guess. But speaking of English football, and fast forwarding from the Victorian era to now by 100 years, the Premier League. What's going to happen there? Because there's some really interesting ideas that have been thrown about, and rumors, I guess, that have been coming out of England and the UK in the last couple of days about what to do with this season. And it seems that they've come up with an idea of doing sort of like a World Cup style mega television event. There's still 92 games left to be played. They were trying to do it over the summer between June and July, but isolate all of the teams. So somewhere, I think, in Middle England, if I remember correctly, and everybody would be sort of isolated in their own camps, separated, players separated from their families, separated from friends. They would be doing extensive tests to make sure that nobody is tested positive for COVID-19, because obviously if that happens, that could derail the whole plan. But the idea is to try and find a way for the season to finish. But do you think that that's a feasible way of doing that? That it's a good idea to try and do it that way? Or should they be looking at other, I don't know, maybe we can talk about other ways they could be looking to finish?
I think it's not a bad idea, because I think it's the Premier League. It's they think big in that case. So we have a big problem. Let's find a way to deal with it and do it in a big fashion. So World Cup style, in some weeks everyone watching football. But the problem we have with COVID-19 is that we're unable to know what it will be in some weeks.
Of course.
We have been unable to control the COVID-19 spreading all around the world. And as you perfectly say, Semra, if we just have one player that tests positive, all the plans fall down, because then you have to isolate all the other players, the teammates, and it will make it complicated. We know that it's also some kind of agreement between the players and the most part of the clubs and federations as well, to trying to find a date where all the big championships, I'm talking about England, I'm talking about Spain, I'm talking about Italy, France, will come back to play at the same time to make it easier. But the problem is the reality in all the countries right now is quite different. It's not the same, the reality in Italy right now, or in northern Italy, than in Germany. So I don't know.
And even the UK is a few weeks, or even, probably a few weeks behind us here in Spain too, and probably a month behind what's happening in Italy.
Obviously.
Extremely difficult to coordinate with that in mind.
So that happened is that in a moment where football was a big show and everyone was winning a lot of money, we had that crisis that no one expected, it's COVID-19. And everyone is trying to find a way to end the season, because all the experts agree that if we cannot end the season, a lot of clubs, but also federation, will lose a lot of money. So when all the clubs and all the federations say that we need to finish this season anytime, anyway, they're thinking more in money than the competition itself. The president of the Spanish Federation, Mr. Luis Rubiales, have been talking with the press, and he said that. So our first priority is health. The second one is economy. And then the third one is competition. So when we talk about that we need to end the season at any cost, it's not because we need a champion and we need to know which teams go down and which teams go up. It's because all the clubs and the federations create an economic plan thinking that they will win a lot of money. And this money suddenly is disappearing. So they need that. So that's why they are trying to find a way that's why they move the Euro to next year. That's to create a new days, weekends to play in June and July, because they need to end the season at any cost. So I think the idea in England, it's quite good. I think it's a good show. But I think that no one knows if we can do that, because the last word will be in the hands of the governments in base what is going on with the COVID-19.
Yeah. And I think another thing to take into account, and this is another, Miguel Delaney was the person who wrote the journalist who wrote the article, explaining this possible idea of finishing the rest of the season in this way. He also mentioned that logistically it would be a nightmare, and it's true, because you have to think about the officials, you have to think about healthcare workers as well, if they need to have hospitals nearby that are available if a player gets injured and you need somebody to take them off the pitch, or you need to take them to get looked at. And that's obviously secondary to what's happening if people are coming in testing positive for COVID-19. What's going to happen with broadcasters as well. You need somebody there to televise the event. So it's not just the clubs, the players, and the people internally, but there's a lot of external factors as well too that need to be taken into consideration in order to make sure that this could actually work and be pulled off in a safe and plausible way.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. I think that's the right question. The right question is that it's even in a stadium without supporters, it is quite complicated. It's not just about the players and the referee. It's more people working there, especially if we talk about the people that's working in hospitals. If the situation is complicated, it's really a good idea to ask a doctor to go to the stadium in case if a football player gets injured when he could be in a hospital helping. Well, that's why we must say that if the football comes back in June, it's because the situation with the COVID-19 will be better. But even in that case, it's hard to imagine that situation. I don't expect football in June, maybe in the late June. But well, obviously, I'm not an expert in health system and in the COVID-19. And all the people that try to be positive, saying, "Okay, this will be over," they were wrong. It's been the situation. It's really complicated. That's why, for example, in Italy, it's obviously the country in Europe where COVID-19. It's harder. The situation is more complicated, especially in northern Italy, especially, for example, in Bergamo, the city where Atalanta is based. The situation is really complicated. It's horrible. And now some experts say that one of the problems is that when COVID-19 was already spread all around Italy, they allowed to play this football game in the Champions League between Atalanta and Valencia in the San Siro Stadium. So some people say that maybe Bergamo offering so much because they put together a lot of people, and that can be one of the reasons. It's some doctors putting that hypothesis there. I don't know if it's true or not, but the case is that in Italy, that is who are suffering the most, and also maybe the ones that have a different perspective. A lot of football clubs and a lot of football players start to say that maybe the best option is to end the season. No, don't play anymore, and start to play the next season, next September, October, when it's possible. But accept that we don't have the conditions to end the season, and that obviously
just finish it as it is. Nobody wins, nobody gets relegated, nobody gets promoted. The same 20 teams in the first division stay in the first division. Well, they just start over. This one is just a write-off basically, and we just completely begin again. For the 2020-2021 well, that's a mouthful season.
That's the question, Semra. The question is, if we end the season right now, what happened. Because in the history, when some championships were didn't finish for wars or whatever that happened, the decisions took, but the local federations were different. This year, we already have a situation similar in Chile. In Chile, they couldn't end the season because it was a lot of violence in the street. It was the army in the street. It was a lot of protests against the government of Mr. Piñera, economical crisis, and then as it was a lot of demonstrators, the government took the army, and some people died, and they couldn't end the championship also because they tried to play it again, and then in the first game, a supporter died in the hands of the police. More violence broke up, so they didn't end the season. What they decide is that to have a champion. So the team that was in the lead, it was Universidad Católica, were proclaiming they were the champions. Okay, you won the league. But they decide, for example, no relegations and no promotions. So all the teams that were first in the second division went mad. All the teams that were in the relegation zone were really happy. So, for example, in the case of Spain, the president of the Federation, Rubiales, and the president of LaLiga, Tebas, say our priorities end the season. I don't know when, maybe even next September.
Sure.
End the season. But if we cannot do it, then we will ask the UEFA, so the European Association, to tell us what we have to do. And try to do the same in all the big championships in Europe to make it more serious. And I think that's a good idea. And then ask UEFA and make a big meeting there and say, okay, if we cannot end the championships, what our choice? We decide that, okay, we have a champion. It's the team that was in the first position on the last game. That's one option. Or decide that it's empty. Right. In Italy, for example, Juventus said, the biggest team, the richest team, Juventus say, okay, I think it's a good idea to end the season. But then a lot of people say, like, okay, now you say that because you were first on the table.
Because it benefits them.
And obviously the team that was second and third, that with Lazio and Inter went mad. We want to win because we had a chance to win that. But I think it's hard to say what can happen. But when we have to remember that when all the team, all the clubs say we have to end the season, they're thinking more in money, that not the price to be a champion, so for what can happen. Yeah. They're thinking about money because the most part of them already understood that they will win a lot of money with TV rights and merchandise and tickets, and that money suddenly disappeared. So that's why they need to end the season. And even here in Spain, some people claim that it can be a good idea to end this season next September, but finish this season, and then decide to make a shorter edition of the next season.
Right.
Which they're working.
And I think this is actually a perfect moment to explain what's going on for a lot of these clubs financially in Spain, because there's a big word that all of us in Spain know, or an acronym really, but outside of Spain, people don't necessarily understand the concept, and that's the ERTE, right? ERTE. And that's something that you can probably explain better than I can, but basically it's like temporary help from the government to supply, I guess, financial aid to institutions. And it doesn't have to be necessarily in sport. It can be in any industry. It can be in the tech industry. It can be in the travel industry. It can be in any field, really. But the idea is to help these institutions, these companies, to stay afloat during times of crisis. And it's only meant to last for a few months before the economy kind of picks back up again, and it goes back to normal, and business also goes back to normal as well. So you're better to explain this than me about the situation of Barcelona, because there are a lot of clubs that are looking into this option, but Barcelona, I think, are the most unique and different case compared to the other clubs. And maybe that's because they also have a lot of other departments and teams and sports as well, because it's not just football, right? They've got basketball, they've got hockey, they've got
handball,
exactly. I mean, lots of different
futsal as well.
Futsal as well. So you're talking about a huge club that has thousands and thousands of workers there too. So it's not just the first team of football that we're talking about. But as we already know, in the last couple of days, Messi, Suarez, Piqué, all of the first team members, the big ones, the heavyweights, came out publicly saying that they're going to take a 70% cut to help the club financially. But if I'm not mistaken, they're also still looking into the option of getting an ERTE to get help from the government, right?
Yeah, in fact, they will go for an ERTE, but with the workers of the club. the workers of the club, and also, for example, these players of other teams, of other sports. That are really important in the history of Barça. Some people, when think, as you said, Semra, perfectly, when the people talk about Barça, they just focus in the football team. The basketball team has been really important for the supporters, and also the handball team, the hockey team, the football team, the women football team. Remember, they played the Champions League final last season. They were going to win the league with an amazing players as Ricky Martens, as Caroline Hansen, Graham Hansen. So the women football is also an amazing team for Barça, and they always cut his salaries to help the club. But the most part of the football teams will end doing the same, because we called an ERTE. It's a movement that the government allow to everyone that see that how his industry it's over for some months. For example, if you have an hotel, if you have a restaurant, they're closed. So obviously, then you're not winning money, but you have to pay. Obviously, I don't know, the rent of a building, or you have the taxes. So what you do?
Bill, the electricity, everything, of course.
So what it will be obviously horrible for the economy is at this moment if a lot of industries close down and say, okay, we don't have to disappear, and then a lot of people lost his job. So this ERTE, it's a way to go to the people that's working with you and say, okay, you're not working anymore for me for just this period when we have a crisis. When the COVID-19 is over, you come back to work with us. So you go apply for an ERTE, you have the legal obligation to hire again the people that were working with you.
Right.
And during this period of time, the government helps you to pay the most a number of money similar than the salary these people used to have. So that allowed the people to find a way to buy food and pay the rent and make it until the end of the month.
Right.
So
they pay a portion of the salary in order for people to survive during this crisis, this time of crisis.
Okay, so the government can pay, but I think that it can pay until for each person. I think it's until 100 euros.
1,000 euros, right?
1,000 euros. And that's what makes it difficult in the case of football players, because when we talk about the people working for Barça or for Atletico Madrid, we talk about the people who are working in the office and in the fan shop. So the government will have to pay the salary of this. But you cannot go and ask the government to pay the most part of the salary of Lionel Messi or Joao Felix or Alvaro Morata, because they are winning a lot of money. That's why the club need to find an agreement with the profession. And finally, the most part of Barca players understood that they need to cut the most part of his salaries. It was complicated because the relation between the football players and the board is not the best. But at the end, I think that everyone understands that it was the best for the club. It was the best for Barca, because Barca of the big clubs is the one who is suffering the most, because this COVID-19 crisis appeared in a moment when they have money, cash on the bank. They don't have money. They were been going to the banks asking for loans for money in order to buy players like Antoine Griezmann, or to try to build a new stadium. That project
That's
stopped.
Like 800 million euros or something like that right now.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
it didn't start. It didn't start. But we have to remember that it can be the most expensive stadium in history, because it's not about building a new stadium. It's to build a new stadium in the same place of the Camp Nou without to stop playing in the Camp Nou. So each summer make a new stand, something that can be really expensive. That's why they need the money. And now they have been paying. It's the football club in the world that is paying more salaries to the players.
Right.
They sign a lot of players like Griezmann, Dembélé, Coutinho, quite expensive, and they don't have cash. Imagine the situation. Suddenly, you stop to host football games in the Camp Nou stadium, so no TV rights, no merchandising, no tickets, so they will lose a lot of money. But that's why the situation of the Barca is complicated.
Right.
And
they have no revenue stream, they have no income coming in whatsoever. All they're doing is losing money at the moment. Imagine,
for example, in Spain, sometimes it's the second, sometimes it's the third. Imagine it's the third. The third museum, more visitors at the end of the year in all of Spain, it's a museum of Barca. Normally, the museum with more people is the Museo del Prado in Madrid. That it's an amazing museum full of art, and if you've never been there, you have to go to Museo del Prado. Then it's also an amazing museum up north in Catalonia. It's the Salvador Dalí, the painter museum. Also a lot of people. And then we have the Barça museum. If you close,
you have Messi the artist as well too, if you want to look at it.
Obviously, so we had the big artists, but Goya Velázquez, Salvador Dalí, and Lionel Messi. And if we, for Barça, to close the museum for 2 months, it can mean more than maybe 20 million that you imagine that you will be winning, and it's not there.
Exactly.
20 million. It's a lot of euros. It's crazy. So that's why they need to cut the salaries and try to make it until the end of the season. And then it's another explanation, quite complicated. It's 4 clubs in Spain. We already talked about that in the past, but we have to remember the people again. It's 4 clubs in Spain. That is not like the football clubs in England or all around the world. It's Madrid, it's Barça, it's Atletico Bilbao, and it's Osasuna. Right. These 4 clubs belongs to the fans.
Yes. Correct.
It's a different structure and a different laws. In the case of that, if we have to remember the next year, so the year of the Olympics, 2021, it will be the
Euros.
And the Euros all change. That will be the last year of Mr. José María Bartomeu as a president of the club.
And you don't think there's any chance that it's going to those elections are going to be moving forward to this summer? Because I know that there was talks about that as well, possibly happening, but maybe because of the pandemic and the crisis, they've decided to hold off on that. Is that how it stands for now?
Yeah, it should be next year because, okay, as you perfectly said, Semra, it was a possibility to make it this year, but it's not allowed to vote, have a digital vote. You just can vote if you're a member of Barça. You pay, as we call here in Barcelona. In Barcelona, we call socis, the socios in Spanish.
Right.
You have to be a member to vote, and you have to go on your own, on person, to the stadium. With the COVID-19, that's impossible.
Of course.
So if maybe next September, next November, but it's quite complicated. So we're working with the idea that these elections to be president of Barça will be next summer, next year, 2021. It's the for Bartomeu. He cannot run for president because that's like in the United States. You can be president 2 terms. Mm-hmm. So when Bartomeu quits, if he leaves the club in red numbers, he has to pay from his own pocket that money. That is a law that Barça have. So if you're a president, you're the board, all the members of the board, and you're doing so bad from an economical point of view that once you leave no money and even red numbers, the difference, the red numbers, you have to put it from your own pocket to be sure that Barça doesn't lose money. That's why the board cannot afford to lose money. And suddenly you have that crisis.
He can't afford to lose money because he's the one who's in real trouble.
So we should imagine with the COVID-19 of the market, next season, Barça more to sell than to buy. So that can be interesting.
But then the problem is, obviously they want to sell, but the value of all of those players that they want to sell is drastically going to drop. And that's something out of their control. Because, and it's not just for Barça, it's the whole market in Europe and everywhere. It's just the value of the players are going to go down because a lot of clubs are going to be in this kind of financial situation where they're going to be strapped for cash and they won't be able to buy players for the kind of money that we've been seeing in the last few years. So it's really interesting to see what that is going to look like as well. And I know that you have a interesting method, or I guess something that Bartomeu was talking about earlier today, a way that they're going to try and make this work to be beneficial to the club. Yeah,
this morning Mr. Bartomeu gave some interviews giving his point of view and obviously saying that you don't have to worry, we're not in a crisis. But he admitted that next transfer market, it will be different because the most part of the clubs don't have a lot of money. So he said something like, the next transfer market, it will be more about exchange players. Like, okay, I have 2 defenders, you have a forward, let's change it and don't pay money. It's like the prehistoric economy, obviously. So
exactly. You have a cow, don't touch my goat. The goat stays here, but you can have a black and white cow, a milk cow for a meat cow.
Exactly like that. When I studied I studied history in the university. It was one of one of this was that it was a moment when the economical system was the first moment that appeared the coins.
Yeah.
The money, because at the beginning the economy was like that. So suddenly, one of the most important markets, its football market, can work like changing players. I don't know. To make an example, it can be, for example, if you go to Barça, knocks at the door of PSG in Paris and say, okay, we want Neymar, we have Griezmann and Umtiti, two Frenchmen, two players for one.
Yeah.
Deal done, and maybe then Paris Saint-Germain say, okay, not exactly. We want Griezmann and Dembélé. Now that's more expensive. Work like that. Let's see. But obviously, everyone is worried about what can happen with football and economy, obviously,
sure.
Because they've been living in a world where everyone was beautiful and got a lot of money, and they didn't expect
utopia
that
doesn't exist.
Absolutely. From a mental point of view, psychological point of view, and point of view, they understand that nothing will change. We have a lot of money, and it's a virus. It's COVID-19 who can break that, and they need to adapt. But so it will be interesting to see what happened, because they have in common a lot of things. They have a main goal. Everyone at football is try to end the seasons, Champions League as well, to stop losing a lot of money. But let's see what happens next season, if it's short or if not, and if someone helps the football clubs, because I think it will be quite unfair to ask the governments to help a football club and not the sanitary system.
Yeah,
I think it's now we understood that football, we love football so much, but it's things more important in life. So from my point of view, I will not ask the government to put money to trying to help Madrid, Barça, or Valencia. I prefer them to help the hospitals or the economy of the people that are losing his jobs.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that for sure. And just circling back to UEFA and some of the things you were talking about earlier and the season being finished, UEFA, at least some good news is that when it comes to the club competitions like the Champions League, the Europa League, it does seem as though they're willing for them to kind of dip into what would be next season in order to get this one wrapped up and kind of do it in a way that nobody really misses out. They would still have to finish by May, I would imagine, because you have the European Championship coming up. So that's the absolute end date. But maybe we see next season adapted in a way where there's maybe not as many games, or maybe there's not as many teams, or maybe there's just not as many international fixtures, friendlies, and that sort of stuff as well. What do you think we might be looking at in terms of a European continental competition and trying to get it finished for this season as well as for next campaign?
I think summer we can expect anything. In the case of Spain, it's a lot of people, important people, that even express his desire to end the season, this season, even if it's necessary next September, October. Mm-hmm. So if we're working with that idea, but imagine that the football is back in June and we're playing in July. Players need holidays, then it will be maybe in August, I understand. So for sure is the next season will be shorter. And someone, I don't know if it's FIFA, I don't know if it's UEFA, I don't know if it's the local federations, if it's the national teams or if it's the clubs, someone will accept that we need to make short competitions, the champions or the national teams or La Liga. But less games is less money. So everyone understands that we need less games next season, but no one wants to be the one to accept that, okay, I will be...
No one wants to be the first one to accept
obviously.
it.
And even Gianni Infantino, FIFA's president, in an interview with Gazzetta dello Sport from Italy, he said, we need less games, shorter competitions, but with more level.
Right.
Everyone say, okay...
less injuries, all that kind of stuff.
He was right.
Yeah.
But then the president of the Spanish Liga, Javier Tebas, say, okay, you're right. Then if you understand that that's the decision, give us example and cut the number of games of national teams, especially friendlies or the qualifiers. Make it shorter. If you understand that, you can do it for us. But it's true that in the Spanish Liga, they understand that maybe they need to find a way to make a different format for next season. I don't know, with playoff, just one round, then cut the number of teams. Like for example, in Scotland, that they at the end of the season, it's 6 teams that fight for to be champions and 6 to be relegated. For example, to make a version like that, to have less games, because right now it's really complicated. This COVID-19 crisis appears in a moment where, if you look at the calendar, it was simply impossible to find a free weekend. It was all the week full of games.
Jam-packed all the time, and now it's year-round almost too, isn't it? So
it's complicated. And next summer as well, in 2021, the idea of FIFA was to create the first edition of a new FIFA World Cup for clubs.
That's right.
With more teams, and 2 Spanish teams were supposed to play, Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid. So I don't know also what can happen. It was supposed to be played in China next year, the year of the Olympics, of the Euro, and the Copa America. That's also really important. We're living in a global market, and suddenly the Copa America, Cup of Nations, are really important, because the Premier League or the Spanish League has a lot of players that should with Uruguay, Brazil, Ghana, or Nigeria. So it's not just a local market. We're living in a global market, and everyone needs to find the right decisions to create a new global calendar. And if it's complicated for the Olympics, it can be even more complicated for football.
No question. I mean, there's so many moving parts, aren't there? But to go back to also what we were talking about, that formula that maybe the Premier League are trying to cook up in order to finish the season. Could you imagine, I know this is hypothetical, but could you imagine something like that working in Spain to finish this season?
I can...
Because, I mean, a lot of players have already come out and said that they don't want to play behind closed doors. They don't like the idea of playing without fans. And we've seen it doesn't really work either, because thousands of fans, they still gather outside of the stadium, like we saw at a Valencia game, right? So it doesn't really help the situation. I'm assuming when you're talking as if the virus was still a problem at that point in time. But if things were to get back to somewhat of a normal situation, could you see that formula being adapted and to work in Spain?
I don't imagine that, Semra. For me right now, it's hard to imagine that, because we have to remember to other people that it's watching us from outside Spain, that with the state of alarm we have in Spain, always the last decision, it's in the hands of the Spanish government. Right. So it's not like suddenly a club or La Liga or the federation say, okay, we want to keep training again and ask the players to go to the sporting complex or to the stadium. No, you cannot do that. It's the government who decided if you can go out to the street or not. So in my case, I'm close at my home and I cannot go out I'm allowed to go out just for shopping. Yeah. Just for that. So first you need the government to accept that the situation is better, and some activities, industrial activities, economical activities are finally allowed. In Spain, where even the people are not allowed to go to outside the street to try to run. You have to run at home. The situation it's really complicated. That's why also it's complicated for sportsmen and sportswomen of other activities. Then they need to train at home. Imagine to be an Olympic swimmer. Yeah. At home, you don't have a swimming pool, an Olympic swimming pool.
They have a kiddie pool that maybe they can just go.
In fact, the football players have a swimming pool, but the swimming Olympians, they don't have a swimming pool at home, so they cannot train. So for them, it's even harder because you have to stay at home. Right. So once the government imagine, okay, we can have football games in the stadium, it's also the government who decides if it's with supporters or not. So when football players say we want to play in a field stadium, I think it's a nice touch because they remember that football without fans is nothing.
Right.
And when the football clubs say also that we want a stadium full of people, they are thinking about the fans, but also they are thinking about his own pocket, because a full stadium is money, and an empty stadium is less money. But at the last, if we had to try to imagine the situation, everyone, football players, football clubs, will accept that if it's better to end the season with fans that don't end the season. So if it's in June and the last option is we have to play without fans, they will accept that. And in that case, maybe the football players will claim that happened with our security, about our health. Maybe we want to stay at home. But if we talk about the fact of an empty stadium, I think it's a possibility that, because they need so desperately to end the season for money. So at that time, if you go to the football players and you say, okay, if we end the season without fans, you will start to win more money of your own salaries. Maybe they will accept it, because obviously 1 month it's okay, 2 months it's harder, but imagine 3-4 months with your salary cut. So maybe then a lot of football players will say, okay, we accept to end the season without fans, because the obsession of everyone is that we have to end the season. The obsession of football, of people working on football in Spain.
Okay. Was there anything else you want to talk about, Mr. Toni Padilla? I think we've covered a lot of ground today, a lot of topics. But is there anything else you want to talk about?
About that, well, I don't know.
I mean, in general, about life, about football, about whatever your heart desires.
I just want to know that everyone is safe at home, and it's everyone it's having a good time despite that. And I know that you are doing that, so I'm happy for that.
Well, thank you. We do have one question that just came in from Bossed Up. Wants to know what you think will happen to the Bundesliga.
With the Bundesliga, that's really interesting, because Bundesliga, I think they are working in a really different way. Germany as a society, as a country, they are dealing with this COVID-19 crisis in a different way. I must admit that I am biased so much German clubs. I think they were the first to take a really solidarity ideas to help the workers of the club and everyone. They were the first clubs where the players accept to cut his salaries. I think it were three different clubs like Borussia Mönchengladbach, where the players on his own, without pressure, accept to put part of his salary to be sure everyone that is working in the club wins the same number of money. Because we have to imagine, for example, that when it's the people that are working for the club with a salary, but then it's a lot of people that just works in the stadium when it's a football game. Steward, the people that sells the beer, all these people. Sometimes these people doesn't work for the clubs; they work for other people. Independent agencies.
Yeah.
So a lot of football players in Germany are putting part of his to be sure that these people is winning the same number of money that without the crisis. So they're working so well, and they know for sure that one option is to don't end the season. In fact, the most part of professional championships in Germany, I'm talking about handball, really important there, hockey or basketball, they end the season. And it's a possibility that maybe Germany is the first ones to say, okay, we have to accept it, we cannot end the season. But they are really different. And for example, the fourth richest football clubs in Germany, that are Bayern, Borussia Dortmund, Schalke, and Rasenballsport Leipzig, they already create like a fund where they put his own money to help the other teams in the Bundesliga, because they understand that if another teams from the Bundesliga suffers a bankruptcy and they don't have money, it's bad news for the Bundesliga. So the teams are helping between each other to stay competitive,
to make sure that everybody stays.
And they will work together, all if they cannot end the season, to find the best solution for the next season. I am by them so much. I think that they're working in the right direction, and I'm afraid that maybe in Spain, if the situation gets worse for football industry, more than solidarity, we will see a lot of wars between Federation and LaLiga and the players and the clubs, between inside the same clubs. So I expect that some people listen more to what is doing in Germany, because in a lot of things, I think they are working better than, for example, in England or Spain or in Italy.
Okay, well, another question for you. This one was from earlier in the chats. So I've got to scroll back here to find it. Here we go. Can Barça be under ownership like clubs in the English Premier League? And this question is from Fabol1129, who was with us yesterday as well. So hello again to you. Thanks for being here with us today.
That's a really good question, because as we try to explain, Barça it's living in a historical moment. Because if the board and the president, Josep Maria Bartomeu, doesn't find a way to deal with that in a proper way, maybe the solution will be that, to change the way that the philosophy, the identity of Barça.
Would it ultimately come down to the fans, to the members to decide if they want to sell the club to a one-person owner, or is that something that comes from the top down, from the directors?
Right now, the structure of the club all should pass through an assembly of supporters.
Okay.
But then imagine but it's a lot of voices inside the club right now, or outside, that say that maybe Barça should be less romantic and try to adapt to the modern times. Because it's true that you have a president that it's not winning a single euro to be the president. The board doesn't win money.
Yeah.
So these people with another jobs, someone has hotels, a travel agency, I don't know, they're people with wealthy people, but they're not winning money to be the president. So you're taking decisions that affects a lot of fans, and decisions that move a lot of money, but it's not your money, and you don't have a salary. So sometimes that creates a strange situations where you are in the board, so you have a lot of power, but you're not winning money. And then you want to, you want to be important inside the club. So in some sense, it's a really professional club, and then it's also an amateur club. So some people say, okay, maybe we have to change it all and don't be romantic, and accept that we need to be like Manchester City, like Chelsea, and fight a good owner, and let's see that. But that cannot change if the supporters doesn't allow that. Once a year, always, normally it's in October, it's a big assembly with thousands of supporters. It's a representation of them, not all. It's the oldest the oldest members, and the other one is I think they do some kind of thing to
like a lottery.
Yeah, it's like a lottery, so that you can be elected or not. And then it's not all those supporters.
Sure.
They gather together in a pavilion, and they take the decisions, and they can turn down. For example, past year, Barça the board asked it to increase the limit of debts with the banks. It's a limit. And the supporters say, no, that can be dangerous. You're not allowed. So they vote no. They vote against the president elected by the same members.
Do you know what is the limit now? Do you know what it is?
Not exactly.
Okay. Well.
Not exactly, but I don't know the numbers, but I know that right now,
they're
really close to that.
They're very close to that. Okay.
And that's important, because if at the end of the summer you break that limit,
right,
then the president is forced to resign.
Right.
So that's why it's so important for Barça to think about numbers. So, but if you want to change all the identity of a club, that should pass an assembly. And then if the members understand it is a moment, Barça could be like another club. But it's quite complicated because obviously Barça it's really special for the good and for the bad things.
Well, that's why it always keeps us entertained, them as well as all of the other clubs, right?
Yeah. But especially, obviously I'm based in Barcelona, and I work the most part of the time with all the information related with Barça, and all the things that happen in this year. It's crazy. They sacked the manager being first on the table. Messi argued with Erika Vidal on Instagram. It was that a scandal that Barça was paying to someone to publish on social networks messages to players. Now the COVID-19 is like, what else can happen at Barça? Even though all the Martin Braithwaite affair was quite surprising to see Barça buying the strike for Leganés because they don't have money. That's one of the problems. Barça don't have cash.
Yeah. Certainly was very interesting what's going on with them. It's almost like a reality show in a way. But let's see. What else have we got? We have, well, this is more of a comment rather than a question, but I think I like it. And this is from Poligol, 84. Spanish fans want to enjoy Toni and myself together on Spanish TV. Wouldn't it be fun?
We have a message to to certain people. Well, it will be a pleasure, obviously. I have been doing for a lot of years, and I enjoy it so much. But I must say that I'm really happy working with you as well in the English version, in the international TV. But you can do it somewhere. You can talk in a lot of languages. You can work everywhere.
A lot of languages. But it would be fun to do it. Maybe one day we can do one of these chats in Spanish. Why not?
Yeah, it can be a good idea, obviously. You know, English, Spanish, some Turkish words as well. Oh, a lot of them.
And I understand Catalan, and I can kind of talk a little bit in Catalan. So
imagine.
Anyway, I think that about does it. Is there anything else you want to add?
For me, it's all done. What about you?
I'm all good to go, man. Time to eat some lunch. It's Spanish lunchtime. It's 2:30. My stomach
That's
is
the most
hungry.
important thing. I'm getting hungry.
All right. Well, Toni, thank you very much. A pleasure as always. I'm happy to see you. Happy to see you doing well. I've seen your wonderful face as well on Gold TV. For those of you who are in Spain, he's keeping very busy indeed, this man right here. So you can find him on Gold TV in the meantime. And hopefully we'll have you back on with us on LaLiga very soon.
Hope to be back in the studio as soon as possible. It will be the best. It will be that it's all over and everyone is free to go outside of his homes. And it will be now that it's spring and summer. Oh, I miss the streets.
Oh, me too, me too. At least, it's cloudy and rainy today, so it helps to stay indoors. But I'm definitely, I can't wait for the summer to come and for a bit of sunshine and warmth. So anyway, I'll let you go. Thank you very much, Toni. So fascinating as always to listen to you and your insights. And everyone else, thank you very much.
See you next time.
We'll see you guys very soon. Take care of yourself in the meantime. Adios.
Yeah.